Another black unarmed person killed, this time in San Francisco. The police chief is scapegoated and asked to resign, which he does. But what's the change? There's no change. It's a culture. And yes, you can claim that the police chief is responsible for setting the culture. In my mind, that is absolutely not true. When the rank and file feel that there is no accountability, that they can do as they please with no ramifications, then you can change every police chief that you want. But things are not going to change. Now, in this case, I believe that the officers involved should, at the minimum, be fired. How can a person that is unarmed, that presents no deadly threat to police officers, be killed? To me, it doesn't make sense. When a police officer, a single police officer, runs into a situation where a person is acting erratically, or actually even in a criminal manner, that police officer should be able to take non-lethal action, i.e. taser, beanbag, or even to physically confront the person, unless they feel that that person is so physically overwhelming that they are not in the position to take control of the situation. When that occurs, obviously they should call for help. Police officers take the job to supposedly protect and serve. Protect and serve does not mean that you do not take the risk of coming into a physical confrontation. I'm not talking about a lethal confrontation. I'm talking about a physical confrontation. When a person is unarmed, multiple police officers should be able to subdue that person without killing them. But all too often, instead of lethal force being the last option exercised, it is often the first option exercised. And it is the first option exercised when it comes to people of color. There have been more than one instance of an absolutely naked person being encountered by the police. I mean, buck naked from top to bottom, both male and female. And that person was shot and killed, both male and female. Why? I don't know, other than the police wanted to shoot someone and they exercised that option. Obviously, a naked person presents no deadly threat to the police officers. Now, could a naked person present a threat of potential bodily harm to a trained police officer, a police officer trained in self-defense? Well, if that person is 6'6" and the police officer is 5'10", yeah, I'll go along with that one. But a lot of the times, the person that is in need of help, not murder, is an ordinary sized person, and the police officer, in some, if not a lot of the cases, has a physically greater stature than the person that they've encountered. But they all are a bunch of, I want to say something, but I'll change it up to scaredy cats. And I think you know what I want to say. We need to have laws that prohibit the use of deadly force unless there is a weapon involved, i.e. a gun or a knife or an instrument that could be used to either batter or kill. And to be honest with you, I'm not even that hot about a bat. But in cases where there are no weapons, the police should be prohibited from using deadly force. They need to be able to use stun guns, tasers, bean bags, pepper spray, etc. in those cases. And they need to utilize their numbers. It's called a swarm. They can bum rush a person that has no weapons and should be trained in order to be able to subdue that person. Now I'm ranting and raving here, but really quick, the mayors need to be held accountable. The police officers themselves need to be held accountable and fired and prosecuted. The district attorneys need to grow a pair and prosecute these guys. And in my opinion, this is not going to change until you actually have police officers fired and prosecuted, so that they will think twice before using deadly force when it is absolutely not necessary. This is a training issue. So anyway, we're going to jump into this police chief in San Francisco that basically is being scapegoated for the murder of an unarmed African-American woman. And he's being scapegoated by the mayor of San Francisco. But again, this is not going to change until you have the ability to hold police officers truly accountable, the DA step up and grow a pair and actually prosecute these guys. And if you have to generate a special prosecutor for every single one of these cases, that is in fact what you need to do.
And divided, and tensions between our law enforcement and communities of color have simmered for too many years, and that has come into full view. That's why I have asked Chief Sir for his resignation.
That was San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee Thursday announcing the resignation of his chief of police. Greg Sir's resignation was requested and submitted just hours after an unarmed black woman was shot and killed by San Francisco cops. Deputy Chief Tony Chaplin is the acting police chief until a national search is conducted for a permanent replacement. Joining us via Skype to talk about this is President of the San Francisco NAACP, Dr. Amos Brown. Dr. Brown, we had the shooting last year. It took place, and I was your keynote speaker at your conference there right after that. And it's clear there's a problem in San Francisco Police Department in terms of how cops actually respond to various incidents involving people of color.
It just mirrors what's in America. And San Francisco has gotten away with being touted as a progressive liberal city. But in this city, there is that demon of racism. And that's why we are having this unfortunate situation happening again.
We had a shooting last year, and now you have this one. Did the police chief do anything in the previous year to change the culture in San Francisco?
Yes, to Chief Sir's credit, we have been working collaboratively as NACP, faith leaders, community-based organization leaders for a whole year on a 3-point program that was introduced by the NACP. First, there was cultural competency training, community-based policing, and a vigorous effort to recruit more African-American officers. However, the politics and the scapegoating of the unfortunate deaths of these two persons created such a hostile climate that Chief Sir and the mayor mutually agreed that it was time for him to step aside.
Do you believe he should have stepped aside?
Personally, I say no.
And why is that?
Because we're dealing with a culture. There's a difference between a culture and a character in an office. We must tell the truth and do the right thing. However, Acting Chief Chaplain is a good man. He has the character, the competency, the chemistry, and the courage to continue all of the reforms that Chief Sir and Black leadership signed on to.
All right.
We've gotten resistance from the Police Officers Association. And they need to be called to task about how they have stonewalled and only thought of themselves and not the bigger picture of the city.
All right. Dr. Amos Brown, we truly appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So, again, it comes down to the rank and file police officers, but I meant to make mention of the police unions. We need to depower these police unions. The police union in New York is one of the most powerful unions in the country. And they need to realize that it's not all for one and one for all here. If some police officer is irresponsible and actually is a criminal, could kill someone, illegally kill someone, it should not be common practice to search for a way for them to defend a person who absolutely commits murder. And that's what these police unions do. No matter what an officer does, short of killing the president, and in these times, they might even try to defend that. The police unions will defend every act of an officer in their union, every act. When Daniel Holtzclaw was convicted in Oklahoma, the police union actually tried to partially defend this guy when it was obvious that this guy was guiltier than sin. They stepped up for him. You cannot defend criminal. I don't care, family member or not. If the person commits a criminal act and there is no doubt whatsoever that they did it, yeah, you try to help them, but you can't defend bad behavior. And that's what all of these police unions do. They defend bad behavior. They fight for officers to keep their jobs, and they know damn well that the particular officers that are being dismissed and fired should not have their jobs, but they'll go in, excuse me, and fight for an officer to stay on the force, and then when the officer commits further offenses, they'll continue to defend them. It takes like a zillion defenses, a zillion crimes committed by officers before they finally will get kicked off and dismissed from a position as a police officer. And then what do? They just go to another police department and get a job. We need a national registry of fired and dismissed police officers, and when that occurs, they need to have their peace officer status revoked nationwide. That, in my mind, would put the fear of God into them so that they would think twice before killing someone, framing someone, committing perjury, i.e. filing false police reports, things of that nature. And until we do that, i.e. take the power of the unions and reduce it to basically handling disputes. I'm not talking about supporting someone who committed a crime, but handling disputes, salary arbitration, benefits, things of that nature, but giving them no power whatsoever to have any say-so in the hiring and firing of police officers. We're going to continue to have this problem. Now again, police officers, when they come into contact with minorities, they tend to want to use deadly force. At the same time, when they come into contact with non-minorities, waving guns, they have no problem talking to a white person for 30 minutes or more without utilizing deadly force. And there are just too many videos out there that support my statements on both sides. So we need to do something. We need to do something about this as quickly as possible. The minority communities obviously have no trust, no faith in the policing of their communities, especially given the fact that so many instances are there where people have been killed, and in some cases the people have called them asking for help and been killed, and no accountability, no charges brought, no jail time, not even a "I'm sorry" in some cases. So this absolutely needs to change. This is, I'm just adding this to it. This is the panel making their thoughts known regarding the situation that occurred in San Francisco with the police chief stepping down.
Thank you.
Let's go to our panel. Ava Jones, the Weaver Leadership Strategist, Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women. Ralph Chittum, Senior Vice Chair, DC Republican Party. Barbara Arnwine, Founding President, Transformative Justice Coalition. Again, we keep seeing this. Actions of cops leads to superintendent or the police chief either resigning or being fired, yet the culture persists.
Absolutely. I mean, and the culture is something that's not just embedded in the police department, as was rightly mentioned. It's also the police union. It's also, quite frankly, the entire criminal justice system. When you have DAs that refuse to bring charges, or if they do, they throw cases. So the issue is beyond a specific police department or any just police departments in and of themselves. And I would argue that really, even as bad as the culture is, you're not going to ultimately be able to change the culture until you have some sort of accountability. Until cops start going to jail for killing people, nothing is going to change.
And what we just heard is, sir, as Dr. Brown said, is being scapegoated. So you get rid of the chief of police, you do something that makes people feel good emotionally, but you haven't done anything of substance to move the ball down the field, to do anything constructive. And unfortunately for the black community, we keep going for emotionalism. We keep going for nonsense. Where instead of just fighting for some real culture changes, for some real differences, we get one person fired and we think we've accomplished something, but nothing ever changes.
Well, I think it's very significant that in the articles that have been published, that the very activists that were very active here, let's be very clear, that there was an active series of protests that were ongoing almost daily. This has been one of the most active areas, Oakland and San Francisco, in fighting against police brutality, police killings. And we got to understand that there were 5 people who had been on a 17-day hunger strike. But those very activists said, counter to your point, that this was not enough, that they were not happy just about the resignation. They thought it was an important step, and I agree with them, that when you have 3 people dead on your watch, you're responsible. Somebody has to pay, the chief pays. And I think this is significant that it happened this way. But at the same time, changing police culture is absolutely critical. This department has been under investigation for over 5 years for all those racist emails, and they were brutally evil emails. We know that this, police chief tried to make some changes, but if you can't command the respect of your rank and file, you either have to make some radical changes and get rid of some people, or you have to bring in, new people. You just have to do a lot of things, and I don't think they did enough, frankly. I think the, quote, de-escalation training, the little cultural competence training, all that stuff is not enough to deal with the systemic, embedded racial profiling, racism that exists in policing in our nation. It's got to be more extreme. And it means you got to have some people kicked out of your police department because they are bad apples, and they will continue to infect the entire and spoil the entire branch.
You're exactly right, and that's the problem. There is a lack of ability to even admit that they're a bad apple.
Exactly.
There's and that is uniform across the board. I mean, even when it comes to even minute things, like you have policemen protesting Beyonce. You cannot even admit to the fact that people have a right to be angry about people being killed who are unarmed.
But Dr. Brown admitted that there were steps and progress was being made with Sir. But he said, because of this last incident, the well had been poisoned to the point that they felt that they had to get rid of him. Even though he was making progress, steps were being made, they had to find a sacrificial lamb, and they served up the leader.
Oh, and that's typically what happens. Folks, shifting to another story.
All right, so basically, as I indicated, they needed to fire and prosecute the officers who actually committed the crime, and that would send a significant message to the rank and file: if you screw up, you're going to face the consequences.